Scrimper UK here again. Today I'm going to talk about plug tops like these. It's going to be a two-part video, so that rather than have one great long video I'll have two shorter ones. The first part I'm going to talk about the plugs. It doesn't sound very exciting, but it does have a history to it. Talk about the plugs and how they work, and in the second part I'm going to actually show people the correct way to fit a 13 amp plug top. Now the reason I'm doing this video is because quite often on social media you read stories from people asking the question, I've just bought this gadget, laptop, whatever, from such and such company, and they've sent it with a wrong plug on. It's got one of these 2-pin Continental plugs. What am I going to do? How can I get this thing working? And people are answering and they're saying, well, it's simple, just go and buy a Continental plug adapter and you can convert it to a 13 amp plug. Or others might say, oh, I wouldn't put up with that, send it back and make them send you a replacement. Well, that may be true and correct, and they shouldn't send it out with the wrong plug on, I suppose, but why inconvenience yourself? Because the simplest way to do it is to just get a pair of cutters or any other device, get your device here with the wrong plug on, chop it off like that. That was a proper 13 amp, but it doesn't matter. And replace it with the correct plug. Wire a plug on. Job done. Why spend hours of your time and frustration sending it back just for the sake of putting that? I couldn't believe there are people out there that first of all don't realise you can just chop it off and put a plug on, and secondly don't know how to put a plug on. So that's the reason I'm sort of doing this little video. Now, if you're brought up in my time, you'll know that most appliances in the old days didn't come with a plug attached, and they always had to be fitted either by the customer who bought the product, or if you went to a decent shop like one of our shops, we fitted the plug on for you. In fact, all the places I've worked for and the one we run myself, we always fitted a plug for a customer. Nowadays everything comes with a plug. The reason it didn't have a plug, obviously it kept the cost down to the manufacturer, but the other reason was that plugs were not standard. Nowadays everybody uses the 13 amp plugs like these, but in the older days there were a plethora of different types of plugs, and I'm just going to show a few now because they are quite interesting. First of all, you had this lovely little plug and socket, which was the 2 amp. I think they're quite cute actually, and funny enough these are still coming back into use now. They sort of died out, the 2 amp round pin plug this is, they died out, but now people are fitting these so they can connect them up to the lighting circuit and plug in table lamps and devices that are operated by the switch on the wall. So that's quite a good idea, and it's a nice little plug and socket. So that's the 2 amp one. Then there was the 5 amp plug. Again, none of these plugs had fuses in, although it was possible occasionally to buy these with a fuse fitted, a special one, but normally they didn't have a fuse because it was fused back at the main circuit board. You had a fuse for each socket. So there's the 5 amp one, and then you had the 15 amp, which was equivalent to our modern 13 amp, only it was 2 amps higher, 15 amp. Again, no fuse in it because it was wired directly to the fuse board with the fuse in the fuse board. So that's the 15 amp. Lots of appliances had this, all the washing machines. It would be no good the manufacturer putting this one or this one on because the customer might have a different socket. So that's the reason. Then, if you went to the extreme, there were these unusual ones. This is a Dorman Smith plug, and it's actually got a little fuse, but the fuse is a screw-in one in the leg. I'm going to take it out so you can see it has a little spring inside. It's a special, there's the fuse, can you see that? It's got a little thread on the end and a spring in there, and you simply screw it into the plug like that. So you could change the fuse without taking the plug apart, and it's got a round pin with a slot in it. This was a Dorman Smith equivalent opposition to the 13 amp system, but it never really caught on. A few housing estates, council estates in our area did have all these fitted, so that's the reason I've got them. Then there's the Wilex system. This was another system which has, as you can see, a round pin in the centre with a hole down the middle and two flat pins. These, like the other one, had a fuse fitted. That one's got 2 amp on the top, and it had a small 2 amp fuse inside. I can actually open it if you're interested to see what it's like. Well, I think I can open it. There's 2 screws on there. The reason I'm opening it is to show the fuse is different to the normal fuse. It's what we call a 5/8 fuse. There we go. And you can see there's the little fuse, that's the 2 amp. It's quite a nice little plug to wear. You've got your 2 connectors here. This is your live connection, obviously. This is the earth, and this one's the neutral, and then you've got your cord clamp there, and the little 2 amp fuse. Well, that's the Wilex system. Again, that never caught on. It's quite an interesting system. And then, of course, the other system they used, some houses only had a 2-pin plug. And obviously, you couldn't use this for an earth appliance. Well, you could, but it wouldn't be safe. 2-pin, and you'd have a 2-pin socket on the wall to plug it into like that. Or in some circumstances, you could get a thing called a BC adapter, like this, and you'd plug your machine into that and use it from the light socket. In fact, lots of people use vacuum cleaners from the light socket in the early days because a lot of houses didn't have 13 amp sockets or any sort of socket on the wall, so the only option they had was to plug it into the light, and in some cases houses only had 1 socket, so this was what they used. It's not really safe, but that's the thing they used. Now the ultimate in plugs is this one. This is what you call a fit-all plug, and it's designed for people who take, well, nowadays again you wouldn't use it, but when you had a different range of sockets in houses and places. For example, we used to go around showing cine films. I belonged to a cine club, and lots of places you couldn't guarantee whether they'd have a 13 amp socket or a round socket or whatever. So this was called a fit-all plug, and you selected this little lever here to choose which you wanted, and then you pulled it out like that, and in this case, ignore the centre one, the 13 amp pins come out, the square pins, and you twist them, and that now is a 13 amp plug. Now if you had a round pin one, you'd put those in again, turn those in. It's a bit fiddly. And then you move this selector along, and then if you moved it right across there, you get the 15 amp. And you just pull the pin out. Oh, sorry, you can't see it there. It's a bit awkward because I can't see what I'm filming actually. This one's a bit stuck. You have to move it a bit more. Then that one would come out, look, and you screw it with your fingers. And the same with the earth pin. Ignore that one. And there you've got a 15 amp. And again, you could, if you wanted to, but you could screw that one in. Move this again, and then you get a 5 amp from smaller pins, so it would fit various sockets, whatever. So you'd fit it on an appliance, or in this case a film projector, and then it would always fit to any plug or socket wherever you went to. They didn't really catch on. I used to have one on my cine projector, but in the end I replaced it with an ordinary 13 amp. So that's the different plugs and things. There's also a few special plugs you can get for people with arthritic hands and things. This one's quite nice. It's got a handle on, so that when it's easier to pull it out. And this is an extreme version of that, which is got a larger handle. You can get your whole hand. If you're an elderly person and you struggle pulling a plug out. I mean, let's face it, we all struggle sometimes to pull a plug out. I mean, it's a bit bulky and ugly, but if you're stuck, that's much easier to pull out than one of these, which you can't get a grip on. And the other thing that you could do is get one of these. These were popular at one time, and what you did with these, you simply got your plug and poked that over the pins like that, and bent it around the back, and did the same with that. It's only a simple cheap thing. They come in a pack of 2. They were only about £1, I think, for 2. And then it gave you this little handle on the back. It's called a plug mate. I don't know whether they're even still available. We used to sell them, but it's quite handy, and it's quite neat actually. So that's that. The only other thing to mention about plugs is the confusion over fuses, and I wanted to cover this because I've seen some wrong, what I consider to be wrong information on the internet about it. Now, when you fit a plug to an appliance, you should always make sure you've got the right fuse in, and most plugs come with a 13 amp. And in fairness, that will cover most eventualities. If you're going to get a serious fault on an appliance, it's going to blow a 13 amp fairly quickly anyway, and most houses have safety earth trips in their consumer units for danger of electric shock. So it's not that worrying about the fuses, but there are different ratings, and I've got a little card here I put them on to show you. Some of these are quite unusual. You don't see them very often. I'm trying to get it in the camera. I can't see what I'm doing. It's all upside down. Right, there you go. I think. Up that way a bit, perhaps. Oh, I'll move the camera. It's easier. Sorry about this, folks. Right. Now, you'll see there, we've got, at the top, there's a 13 amp, there's a 10 amp, there's a 7 amp, a 5 amp, a 3 amp, and a 2 amp. Now, in actual fact, you don't need to worry about all this. There are only two recognised ones that you really need to worry about. That one, the 13 amp, and that one, the 3 amp. You can basically forget all the others. They do exist, but you probably have a job to find them, especially the 7 amp and the 10 amp and the 2 amp. There are some 5 amps about. Now, when it comes to most appliances, like table lamps and things, you'd put a 3 amp in a table lamp, and lots of other small things like gadgets and things. But some people work it out by taking the amperage, or should we say the power, of an appliance. For example, say it's a 1000 watt device, and then they divide the voltage, approximately 230 around here, into the power to arrive at the current rating in amps, and then they put the correct fuse in according to that. So for example, just as a rough estimate, easy way of working it out, assume it's 250 volts and the thing's 1000, divide 250 that into 1000, that's anybody can do, that's 4. So a 5 amp fuse would cover it admirably. Now where it comes astray is in things like vacuum cleaners, because I've seen references to people who've worked it out on that system and they've arrived at a figure of 4.5 amps, so therefore put a 5 amp fuse in a vacuum cleaner. Well, I'm sorry, that is not correct. I did work for Hoovers and worked for them for many years, and they always suggested you should put a 13 amp plug in. The simple reason being that when you switch an appliance with a motor on, you get an initial surge, and that surge is much greater when it's starting up than when it's running, and therefore if you put a 5 amp in, quite often, not all the time, it will blow. The fuse will blow, and that will cause a nuisance. So they always reckoned with a thing like a vacuum cleaner or a polisher or any device with a motor in, you should put a higher rated fuse in to stop nuisance blowing, and that is quite important. So basically you only need to worry about the 2 amps, sorry, the 3, forget the 2 amp, the 3 amp and the 13 amp. Those are both widely available, and a good guide is the 13 is okay for most things, and if you're not sure it'll be okay. The 3 amp is fine for things like table lamps and small gadgets. In the next part I'm going to show you actually the best way to wire up a plug.